Let us start on what we have on the agenda today. To introduce myself, I'm Kamran.Alvi. I'm your host for today. I lead the application security advisory services and co-lead cyber defense from our Netherlands security practice at Accenture. I've been with Accenture for 12 years now. In my previous life, I was a developer. So I understand what development teams go through when we ask dev teams to implement security. My experience is mainly focused around the length and breadth of application security. Uh, I also have a guest speaker with me today, Irfaan.Santoe, who is the Director of Global Security at Wolters Kluwer. He is the leader in providing strategy and vision on DevOps transformation programs and building security. I'm delighted to share this platform and co-host this session with him. You will get to hear more directly from him in a couple of minutes when we start our first presentation on DevSecOps strategy and design that Irfan is going to present. Then I will share my experience on the implementation approach of security in DevOps. After that, we will open the floor for Q&A and then wrap up. With that, I will pass it on to you, Irfan, to share your experience on securing DevOps. Over to you, Irfan.
All right, just let me know, guys, whether Kamran, whether you're seeing my screen. I see people nodding. So let me first close over here and sign over here. Okay, good. I think we're good to go.
Yeah, I can see your screen, which is white for now.
Yeah, good. It's always a tricky one. All right, I think this is good. First of all, thank you so much and welcome everybody. I want to thank Accenture for inviting me so I can share my views with you. And normally it would take me like 45 minutes to give this talk, but I had to compress this to 25 minutes. And the good thing that happened with that is it forces me to even think more. What is it that I want you to take away from this session? And it was an exercise, but I promise you I found the answer. And what I want you to take away from the session is this picture over here. And I'm gonna briefly explain this picture over here to you. So what are we seeing? We're seeing a man that is harvesting a nice looking green watery coconut, but then in a very disturbing way, right? I mean, he could have just been on the ground and pick up that coconut, harvest that coconut like that. And you're thinking he's overdoing it, right? And if you look closer to the picture, you might think that that is also me, but I can tell you that's not me. It looks like somebody likes me, but it's not me. But many times I have been at organizations working for them where I felt like this, right? I felt like I had to do a process, whether it's an HR process or IT or compliance, doesn't matter. That didn't make much sense. And I'm pretty sure that you recognize yourself in such a situation as well. Everybody has gone through it. Such a waste of time and unfulfilling. And what I want to ask you throughout this part of the presentation is to really keep this feeling with you, right? Because this is exactly what we don't want to happen to our DevOps engineers. We don't want to implement security, making them feel like this. That's the takeaway, guys. That's already disclosed. A little bit about myself. I think Kamran already introduced myself, so I'm not going to speak a lot about that. Before working for Wolters Kluwer, I did work for the ABN AMRO Bank as well. I had different roles over there. And the latest role that I had was what we call the global head of security engineering, where I had the privilege basically as ABN AMRO is massively moving towards DevOps and cloud to lead the integration of security within that transformation of DevOps and cloud. I also want to share that I have a technical background. I have a master in science in programming, so I really understand the developer world as well. And if you talk about DevOps and cloud, I do feel compelled to really go through some fundamentals of what DevOps is with you. And for that, I think we need to go back to history as well, to take a closer look. How did the world look before DevOps, right? So before DevOps, you would have Dev, which are all developers. They would build applications that matter, right? So, for them, it's important that they push changes fast to production. They get the feedback from their customers. Basically, they want to go fast. And then you would have your ops engineers, who would be mostly considered as run people. They want to have applications being run that are stable, that customers can rely on, right? So naturally, they will also make sure that before application goes to production, changes go to production, rigid testing happens on that. So they'll push back when applications behave unpredictable. Now we can naturally feel, right? So developers want to go fast, ops people want to have stability. And now we feel that there is a tension between these two teams, sort of sense of irritation that they're working against each other instead of working together to achieve the business objectives. So this picture illustrates like you're driving a car and you have two pedals, basically your gas pedal and your brake pedal. And you'll have the developers that want to go fast. So let's assume that they're the gas pedal, and then ops people that want stability or brake. So what happens when you press on the gas pedal and the brake pedal at the same time? So your car will make a screenshot, and I'll leave it like that. I'll not explain the joke. But in this picture, basically, I have not even included the security department, guys. So just for argument's sakes, we can consider that the security department would be the handbrakes. And if these critical components, critical function of driving a car do not work together, I don't even believe you'll be able to go from A to B. You'll be able to even reach from A to B, right? So it's very important that all these functions, they work together to make it happen. So we have already looked at how the world of DevOps was before, right? So you would have developers, you would have ops people, they are separate disciplines. And we see that there is a wall of confusion, right, between these two teams. And I'm just going to give a very simple example, right? So let's say the application is broken and the run people have identified the root cause has to do with a specific server that's being deployed. And on the other side, we have the developers, right? They might know what the root cause is, but they need to rely on logs to really understand what happened. And more often than not, we see that those logs probably do not contain the information that they need to find a solution. But sadly, mostly, probably the developers will not even have access to those logs, right? So if there's something happening with your application, because of that wall that is between these two different disciplines, people are, these teams are not able to operate effectively. And we don't want this wall of confusion. So how did we solve it? Well, the IT world introduced something we call DevOps. Basically, they said, we're just going to merge these two disciplines into one discipline, right? It's called DevOps. We're going to have developers and ops people both in the same team with the same objective. So they work together as one team. It's not that the developer will write code, they will throw it over the wall, and then operators need to just operate that. But they really work together as one team. And we have the DevOps life cycle, which is a very popular known illustration of that as well, with different phases of the DevOps life cycle. I'm not going to go into that, but basically at each phase, these two disciplines, which are one team, work together so they have faster feedback about what can go wrong and how to solve them. Okay, so in this picture, we don't see security being mentioned. So for argument's sake, we're going to put the security department outside of that DevOps lifecycle. And we see that, security would have their own processes, right? They would have their own execution of whatever process that exists from a security perspective, whether that's pen testing, whether that's a risk assessment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as you can see and already feel, by putting security outside of this DevOps lifecycle, we create another wall of confusion. Okay, and the point that I'm trying to make over here, if we treat security as something separate from the DevOps teams, it's very likely that, again, you're going to break DevOps, right? What DevOps stands for. You're going to push DevOps back to the world of Dev versus Ops, and you'll have the same thing over again. And we don't want that. Again, that feeling, guys, please remember, we don't want that. So how do we solve this? We solve this by giving the the DevOps engineer a security badge, right? We give them a security badge and we make them responsible for securing that application. It's actually that simple. It sounds like a perfect idea, but very hard to implement. So how can this be done? For me, the way I see it and the way I've structured it in my mind and based on my experience is by giving the DevOps engineers a security badge, you will not get there, right? You cannot say, hey, you're responsible for security and that's it. We as security, especially the security department and maybe the IT leadership, we have to go all the way to really enable that. And I think that needs to happen in 3 pillars. And this is how I've categorized it. One is automation. And automation for me is really about, having minimal or even no user interaction needed to do security, to make security happen. It's the way to do security at scale. And we're going to touch upon this one in more details in the next slides. Then the next one for me is what I call, MITology. And MITology stands for methodology and technology. So this means that we're going to use methodologies that are being introduced. Think about Agile, think about microservices, think about CI/CD, but also technologies like public cloud, containers. All these different components can be used as an opportunity to do security even better within DevOps. So we're going to touch upon that as well. And then we have the third pillar, which I call inclusiveness. And inclusiveness for me addresses the mindset of the organization towards DevOps and cloud. If you like, you can call it a culture. So you simplify it with culture, but to be honest, I don't like that word. It's quite a misused word, and I want to stay away from that. I do feel that inclusiveness is even a better word, what I'm trying to achieve with this pillar. It's about empowering the organization in closing the gap between DevOps engineers and security folks. The whole organization needs to become more inclusive, and that's why I like that term better than culture. And to make it easier to conceptualize for yourself, so just assume you want to drive a car from A to B, then automation would be the engine of the car, right? It's you need that engine to be able to get you from A to B. MITology would be more the quality of the roads. It would be about the weather condition. It would be about the aerodynamics of the car. And then finally, inclusiveness would be about the mindset of the driver itself, right? So I can get from A to B. It's my responsibility to go from A to B in a secure manner. And I'm going to use everything that's around me, including the engine, including the aerodynamics and the weather condition to make that happen. So that's an analogy I like to use to describe these 3 methodologies. Let's go into details about each of these pillars. So the first one that I want to quickly stand by is automation. Again, it's not about only giving our DevOps engineers a security badge. We really want to go all the way to enable them. And I strongly believe that for CISOs and IT leadership, if they want to have a chance of doing security at scale, automation is the only way to do it, right? So based on my experiences for the companies that I've worked for and the companies that I've interacted with, I've seen the following capabilities that can be automated. It's not an exhaustive list, but I think when these capabilities, this set of capabilities, when you've implemented the right way, then you really make your case with automating security in DevOps and for a part cloud as well. I'm not going to be able to touch upon all of these capabilities, guys, because I just have 25 minutes. So I'm just going to touch upon 2 of them. We'll just start with threat modeling. So threat modeling is, for those that do not know, it's a systematic way of identifying things that can go wrong in your application architecture, your data flow that you have for your application. Call it abuse cases. And based on those abuse cases, you come up with responses of how to mitigate, how to ensure that it cannot be abused, right? And those abuse cases, they will flow back to what we call security measures. Those security measures you can put on your backlog as a development team. While you're designing your application, you're coding your application, you can basically also implement those security measures. And this can be automated. We have done that in the past. So developers, as they develop the application, the functionality, they can get continuous feedback of what sort of security measures they need to implement based on the threats that were identified. Excuse me. Then we have, as part of this sort of capability sets, I want to go, for example, to secure infrastructure, right? So secure infrastructure for me is about, if you look at mature organizations that, for example, use the cloud, they will set a sort of security context for the cloud workloads that need to land, right? So depending on the criticality, the sensitivity of that workload, you can predefine specific security requirements and controls that need to be enforced when the infrastructure is going to be deployed. So think about, maybe for that specific workload, you want to enable encryption, right? So if encryption is not enabled for data at rest, you want to make sure that an error comes up because your information security policy is demanding it. Think about, privileged users that should have MFA turned on, which is not the case, right? Do you get a notification on that? Or for that very specific workload, because it's internet facing, it's an important application, you want some sort of DDoS mitigation to be implemented. All these things can be put in policies and can be feedback and automated, and make sure that at least you're not able to deploy if those things are not met. All right. These are all capabilities that minimize insecure application development and deployment. And again, as I said, it really enables the organization to do security at scale. So think about it, when you have to you have to check the security of your apps infrastructure for, let's say, 10 teams. Are you able to achieve doing that sort of security testing with the same quality and doing it on time? Maybe you're able to do it for 10 teams, but are you able to do it for 50 teams with the same quality and on time? Are you able to do it for 100 teams? I think you get my point. If you really want to scale your security, automation is the only way to do it. And I can talk to you about, for another hours, what all these capabilities are and how to go about it, what sort of security challenges they solve, and how to apply the defense in depth strategy, because there are still a lot of capabilities, but do we need them all? And my point is yes, we do, because it's defense in depth strategy that we want to apply there as well. Because I'm limited in time, I want to discuss something else that's very important in my experience for when we talk about automation. And that is what I call the heart of automation. So let's just take a look at this picture, and I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to think about it. Think about in your life, if you would, if you can go back, are things that you could have done better, more effective, more efficient, because you had the right knowledge at that time, right? So if you had the right knowledge and the right skills and experience, would you be able to be more effective at? I'll just give you 30 seconds to think about it and also read the picture. All right. So I think this also applies for our DevOps engineers, guys. So they are not security folks. I think 99% of the developers that I've spoken to, they don't have the ambition to become a security professional, right? So do we want them to operate without the right knowledge and skills? And the same applies for the security people as well, right? So most of them, they build a security capability within the organization, and those capabilities will impact around 100, 200, maybe even 500 plus teams. Do you want that without, them building such capabilities without the right understanding of DevOps? So the question was, what lies at the heart of automation? And I can share with you the problem that I've seen, right? So I've seen that many times organizations, when they think, okay, they have to do automation, it's about deploying the technology, the tool. But I think that's one of the things that I've really seen go wrong. Tooling for me is not a capability, right? You have to go beyond just setting up the technology. You have to make sure it's communicated properly, what sort of problem that capability is solving. You need to make sure that the users that will use that technology, that will use that capability, get trained as well. You need to make sure that if there are rules and engines that does the automation, that's keep updated as well, right? And that's tuned towards the context of the organization. Basically, there's a whole playbook behind it, how to make such a capability successful. And I cannot stress it enough, guys. I find this really important. I see too often security people, they stop by just deploying a technology. And I find that there's no or even too little focus being put on the adoption of that technology as part of a capability, right? I see organizations putting it in our policies and standard, but is that the best what we can do? I don't believe that. So I think we need to approach that differently. So if we go back to what's in the heart of the capability, I'm just going to go a little bit faster. I'm looking at the time as well. Not going to touch upon each of these, but the most important thing that I find over here is when you're deploying such a capability, when you're rolling it out, just really think about your target audience. Who is that, right? Most of these security capabilities that are deployed will be done by security departments. And they do not always understand, the way DevOps engineers work. And I see the friction again. Remember that feeling? So the capability should not be designed with not understanding how DevOps work. And I think there is a gap currently between our security folks and the DevOps engineers. They don't understand each other. And what we need to do as an organization, we need to make sure that we are able to close these gaps. Of course, it's easier to make sure that you hire the right people with the right skills and the right expertise at both sides. But we all know that with the current market, especially for security professionals, it's very difficult to find the right skilled people and knowledgeable people. So make sure you set up the right program within your organization, right? A skilling program where you are able to bring that knowledge both to the security department as the DevOps engineer. And I don't think that the CISO managers and CISO leadership, but even the IT leadership should be exempt from that, right? Because they decide mostly on what sort of capabilities should be built on. They have the budget, they do the prioritization. And I think it's very important for them also to skill themselves up. It's a bold statement that I'm making, but I know they are smart people, so maybe they don't need a lot of training, just a mini course or something like that, and they should be good to go. Remember that feeling again? I just want to keep stressing that. This is what we're trying to prevent with doing it right. The next pillar that I discussed was MITology. Again, what we want to do over here, guys, we want to look at the sort of changes that are coming to your direction as a security department or as an organization, whether it's agile, whether it's microservices, new technologies like cloud, AI, and really look at it, whether you can use it as an opportunity to implement security even better, right? So one of the examples of such technologies or methodology is CI/CD. CI/CD stands for continuous integration, continuous delivery. Before CI/CD, right? Before code would go to production, mostly you would say as a security department, stop, I need to do security testing over here, or you need to do security testing. But as CI/CD is continuous, stopping is not an option, right? So we have to approach it differently. Now think about what sort of security testing can you embed in your CI/CD pipeline, right? If you're doing pen testing on the application, maybe some of these pen test use cases can be automated, right? As part of just a normal test unit that you will create. Can that not be part of your CI/CD pipeline, right? Think about these sort of opportunities that can come to you, can enhance the security. The second MITology that I see is what I call public cloud. And public cloud, I don't call it, but this is how it is. It's a huge opportunity. I think most of the organizations nowadays have seen that public cloud can be much safer than your own internally hosted environments. And I strongly believe that, right? So if I look at the $billions that the big cloud providers like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are putting in building secure data centers and secure cloud for us, it's unmatchable. They are the smartest people. but also different capabilities that exist within the cloud, right? Still, a lot of organizations are struggling to implement them internally in their own environments, right? Think about MFA, think about encryption, all these different things. Still, a lot of organizations have a challenge with that. While with the cloud, it's just a check in the box nowadays. What do you know? You can encrypt everything. That's the beauty of it. And the last one that I want to mention as an opportunity to improve security in DevOps is what I call microservices. Microservices is the idea of breaking up, big, large monolithic application into smaller parts. And by doing that, basically you break down the risk as well, right? And you can really tailor your security testing towards those sort of services that are exposed, that have the bigger risk, are part of the attack factor. While if you would have a monolithic application, everything is internet facing, public facing, so maybe you'll have to test a lot, but now you can even make it more precise. And even, if a container doesn't behave well, you can easily shut it down and probably spin off something else. So this sort of technology and methodology brings a huge opportunity to improve as well. I'm going to go a little bit faster because I see that I'm a little bit over time. The last pillar that I want to address, and this is really what I feel that is the secret sauce of doing security in DevOps the right way, is what I call inclusiveness, right? And inclusiveness is about making sure that there's a co-creation mindset between security and development. So most of the security toolings, again, are made for security professionals. And if we really want to shift the security left, right, make sure that our developers, they have the badge, they can operate with that. We need to make sure we co-create that together with them. That the tooling is able, and they are able to use the tooling effectively, the way they think, the way they execute their processes. The next one is what I call taking ownership, and this one is really a call out to our developers and developers community. You have built the application, you run it, and you also need to secure it, right? So we have given you the badge. You cannot just wait anymore on the security folks to tell you what to do for security. This is your responsibility now to take an action upon that. And as last one, as security folks, it's difficult for us to let go, right? So once we have enabled them, still we feel something wrong might be happening from a security perspective. I think this is one of the hardest thing for us to do. But just make that parallel with your kids if you have kids, right? Sometimes we'll have to let them go for them to make their own mistakes. We don't want them to get hurt, but I think that's the only way to really let them grow at their full potential. And I think that's really taking security to the next level if you're able to do so. So you'll have to organize software programs within your organization to address all these different aspects to make the organization become more inclusive. Okay, remember that feeling again. Again, please, as security, you don't want others to suffer because of your action, because of what you have put in place. This is really what we're trying to prevent. And then a call of action for you, if you're interested, just go back to your organization. If you're doing DevOps, if you're doing cloud, please take a look at it. The way you're setting up your security, are you breaking DevOps or are you enabling that? And I've seen many organizations where tough decisions are being taken to move towards DevOps, to move towards cloud, to do microservices. These are very difficult transformation, and it takes courage to do that as leadership. Are you as a security department transforming yourself as well to be able to cope with this change and to be able to add that value, right? Are you able to upskill yourself and grab this as an opportunity to take security to the next level? Okay, I'll close the session here now and hand it over back to Kamran.
Thanks, Irfaan. Let me take over. It was a good one. And I'm sure looking at your presentation, nobody wants to be that team, and especially the person who's cutting the branch. I'm pretty sure about that. So give me a moment. Let me start sharing back. Okay. All right. So we did see we did hear things like inclusiveness, co-creation. Teams need to know what they're doing, why they are doing, right? And that's exactly what I want to address in my approach of implementation on how to implement DevSecOps or other security in DevOps by enabling it. But it's a little high level because we are we are just going to be scratching the surface, I'm pretty sure. So let's move ahead. So we understand from strategy and approach on how to embed security, right, as part of DevOps by incorporating those three pillars. I mean, the three pillars that Irfan mentioned was more related to what uh, these are more generic ones that I'm talking about, that is people, process, and technology, with the most important being the people one that Irfan mentioned and stressed on. Now, let us look at how to bring these three pillars together to form an approach that helps in implementation. What I've tried here is to bring the most important aspects of security in this approach for this presentation in a very broad sense. Uh, Now, as we all know, organizations are driven by business goals, and as long as everything, including security and development, is aligned towards that goal, everyone is working in cohesion. So basically the enabling culture. Uh, the top-down approach is driven by strategy and business goals, which translates what needs to be done for security and when it needs to be done, with the policies, controls, compliance, and monitoring. Right. The operating model that would work for security, how security and development teams will be working with each other to co-create or co-implement security as part of the governance process. To ensure that there is a minimum security standard that aligns with the business objectives that is being followed across teams, technologies, and platform, we have a sanity check in place with controls. And that gives us the assurance to go live in production. Also, to keep a check on what and when, compliance monitoring checks the controls in the operations, BAU, and production. It helps in identifying and deviations from the minimum standards of security. Uh, the what and when are made clear with the top-down approach with what really remains for its effective implementation. Uh, to ensure that teams understand the why behind what they are supposed to do, and then how are they supposed to do it, right? And this is the key here. Having teams trained on the why by training them on the concepts of security, so they understand how security is so closely related to the functionality that they are building, by doing security awareness sessions on what they are doing and why they are doing it, makes the team connect to security and understand it. And to ensure its continuation and sustenance, we need to identify security champions in the teams who are not just able to provide the latest and greatest on security, but also provide a feedback loop to the security team for continuous improvement. The security team is the most important building block in this approach, along with other technology enabling teams. And this team, along with the security trainings and identifying security champions, need to provide that framework to ensure translation of the how by providing the guidance to the teams on what the tools need to be implemented and how, by making the consumption of the tools and technology easily consumable. Because having the tool just deployed doesn't help. Making it, how to adopt it, how to, socialize it with the team, make it centrally consumable. That's the important part that we really need to stress on. A big part of this responsibility also includes how automation should be implemented, and a continuous effort for automating repeatable tasks is made. And then making it easy for the teams to inherit or consume this automation, which will remove bottlenecks about security, and added to that, providing the standards and how-to checklists, which they can follow as part of their development, right? And finally, the most important part is that these two approaches need to have a continuous improvement and feedback loop with each other, and are not disconnected or working in isolation in any area. And then definitely co-create. So co-creation, by keeping and aligning all the feedbacks from all the teams, plays an integral part in sustenance of this model or approach, as we will want to call it. So having mentioned that this approach works best in these journeys, I must say that this is a real question that DevOps teams face, because these approaches are kind of mixed with each other somewhere along the line as they lack clear definitions on what, when, why, and how. So it is important to ensure that we make both approaches as clear as possible, not just for the DevOps team, but also for the whole organization by keeping everything in the security framework aligned with what, when, why, and how. And also mapping clearly with who's responsible. And yes, there is a shift of security responsibility to the DevOps teams as they build their product, so they are also responsible to secure it. But the key is working together with the security team and making an effort on a continuous basis with co-creation. Co-creation is the new way of working that removes barriers between teams and leads the change in building a security mindset. So to show you how this approach would work to prevent a vulnerability in development of an application, I have used one example of an OWASP top 10 vulnerability, that is broken access control, to show how it can be prevented at different layers of this approach. This is a little technical, but I'll try to make it as high level as possible. To just give a quick overview of what is broken access control, it is the vulnerability where an attacker is able to access confidential information or functionality due to missing or improper authentication or authorization. And this can lead to access control issues like files or directories accessible to external parties, gaining privileges, reading sensitive information, executing commands, etc. So that's in a nutshell what broken authentication is. Now, if I take this forward and apply this use case technically on the ground with this approach of top down and bottom up, what I've tried to do here is use only the show you only the plan phase of DevOps and the support model for the team that provides the what and when with the top-down approach and why and how with the bottom-up approach. In the top-down approach, first the policy is about how authentication and authorization should be managed as a central solution. And in the second step, that is subsequently translated as a control about what needs to be done to implement the policy. That is ensuring the authentication and authorization of users is implemented using approved IAM solutions or directory services, right? Uh, Finally, as part of the top-down approach, in the third step, you see how it would be checked for its implementation as part of compliance and monitored in production for any deviation. And now the DevOps team need to start planning this from the conceptual phase by considering this as part of their application architecture. And then this is mainly to avoid any design issues and surprises later on when the application is near their go live. Now that clears what the DevOps team need to do and when they can start on a particular security activity. But do they know why are they doing it? How are they supposed to implement it? This is where the bottom-up approach supports the team in connecting the dots. And as a first step in this approach, the security trainings like threat modeling that Irfan also mentioned helps team in identifying the threats that are related to, like in this case, broken access control, and the countermeasures that need to be implemented when they start writing the code. And then taking this further, the security champion follows up, tracks the requirements to ensure his or her DevOps teams are including security by design from the planning phase. And also the security champion acts as an extended security team member in the team, providing the L1 support on security and collaborates with the security team for any help. This also keeps the feedback channel between the DevOps and security teams well oiled. And finally, the security team, along with the other capability teams like tools, provides the building blocks to implement the required IAM solutions that is available for the teams to consume easily. It is the responsibility of the security team to ensure the solution spans the technical landscape of the organization, which could be an on-premise IAM solution or a cloud directory or both that would be required from a technical requirement. So try to see this as an approach life cycle where the support needs to start with a policy which branches into a control that can be monitored to ensure compliance and then how the security awareness and training provide the support in making the teams not only understand this policy and control, but also relate to their own application, and how they can implement the security solution with the help from security team and other capability teams. Now imagine, as the security and governance teams, we need to ensure all these use cases are first identified, not just from a security perspective, but also from a functional and technical perspective. What is the functional and technical landscape that exists? And then providing the required infrastructure, tools, and support to the DevOps team to complete the cycle of support. Making it easy for the teams to find the solution for every technical use that maps to security and steps to implement it. That is going to be the key in keeping the process going on in an effective manner. This can only be done with a lot of collaboration across all teams. And remember, if you like to change a mindset to make someone understand your perspective, which is in this case, DevOps team understanding security, engage them, involve them. That is the key. And as Irfan said earlier, inclusiveness is the key here. And then, collaboration is definitely required. Moving ahead. So that was just one use case, but imagine all the 8 phases of DevOps from plan to deploy and then operations with all the security policies, requirements across different technologies and platforms. It is a mammoth task, but the easy way to go about it or start it is taking the first step and defining your priorities that are aligned with the business goals and working through this approach. For example, prioritizing top 5 security policies and controls impacting the business goals to start with, and then include more as the journey matures. This way, there is a gradual change for the DevOps teams, which would be more acceptable. And at the same time, the security and other secure supporting teams will be able to scale up support accordingly. In conclusion, I would say this approach is not rocket science, and it tries to simplify the framework that is easy to understand and also relate to. However, as mentioned earlier, it is about the vastness, volume, and mindset. So co-creating with both the top-down and bottom-up approach, working in cohesion with definitive clarity on what, when, why, and how goes a long way in the maturity of this approach. Making security awareness and trainings a continuous activity with network of security champions helps in sustaining the security knowledge in the DevOps team and not make security a once in a blue moon exercise. And finally, providing the DevOps teams the ammunition to go about implementing security and the right tools, processes, and automation so that security doesn't become a bottleneck and a friction point, but more of an enabler. I think with these goals and the maturity approach, you can gear up well for embedding security as part of the DevOps journey. So all in all, so that it's a journey. It has to start somewhere. You can see, you can probably take a moment and then see where you stand in terms of this graph that we have. But yeah, it is always a journey that goes on to mature as and when you start improving your approaches and methods. Well, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening in. Let us see if there are any questions, and we can move to Q&A.